Welcome once again to the GVT YouTube channel. Today I want to talk about Kenya public debts. This is a matter that affects Kenyans either directly or indirectly, and is an issue that has come up every now and then as far as economy is concerned and financial matters. What is Kenyan public debts? Public debts are all financial liabilities. These are the accumulation of all government borrowing, either to facilitate its operation or for investment purposes. When we talk about public debts, there are three things that we need to consider. One is that our public debts has rose to 11.6 trillion as at May 2025. Our GDP ratio is at 67.4% and our revenue ratio is at 67.1%. Another key thing which we must consider as Kenyans is that for every 100 shillings that the KRA collects, close to 96 shillings goes to repayment of our debts. So we only have 4 shillings for every 100 shillings need to spend. This one puts us in a situation whereby once we continue borrowing, we have to borrow to facilitate our expenditure management. Debts are distributed in two ways, in two categories. One, we have domestic debts and we have external debts. Our domestic debt goes at around 6.2 trillion Kenya shillings, and our external debt goes at around 5.3 trillion Kenya shillings. That is as at May 2025. Why do we have rise in our domestic and external debts? One is the physical debt. Our government continue to borrow money, but our revenue expenditure is not in line. There is a mismatch between revenue and expenditure. So we just have to borrow because our revenue we are collecting low and we are spending too much. So we borrow in order to sustain our expenditure. Two is the rise in our domestic borrowing. When the government continue to over-rely too much on financial institutions such as treasury bills and treasury bonds, you realize when I said the domestic debts runs at around 6.2 trillion, and our reliance on treasury bills and treasury bonds will definitely lead to internal borrowing by the government to either facilitate its operation and for investment purposes. Three is the Eurobond buyback. You realize that a partial buyback of the previous Eurobond was facilitated by an initial creating new and a larger Eurobond buyback. This was definitely a financial bad bargain, and the team that was involved in setting up and bargaining for this Eurobond definitely did a financial bad bargain in negotiating in the Eurobond. How does now the government rise above debt borrowing? Now the question is, how then does the government should control these debts? We have 5 main points which the government must use, and I use the quote must use to control its expenditure and to control its debts. One is control of government expenditures. When I talk about government expenditures, there are key things which a government must do to control its expenditure. One is control wage bill. The wage bill at the national government is extremely ballooning. Unemployment of extra CSS and PSS increase our wage bill, because if our revenue cannot match with our budget, why then does the government increase employing the CSS and the PSS? Two, in terms of expenditure control, is the travel. The government must ensure that all its travel are within the limit and not too much. You realize government carrying delegation to United States, delegation to England, delegation to China, all these are expenses which a government cannot even sustain. So why then do we put ourselves in a position whereby we cannot really sustain these travels? We sustain them by borrowing money so that a government can travel with the delegation. Traveling must be strictly restricted to a most important people, not carrying Tom, Dick, and Harry to United States. Carry people who are relevant and will be useful in the manner that when they come back, there is an implementation thing that needs to happen. Another thing which can control expenditure are hotels and conferences. You realize government are organizing hotels and conferences in Mombasa, outside in Tanzania, and other places, spending a lot of Kenyans' money, and the impact of those conferences and hotels are not even felt by Kenyans. So these are the things that government must definitely reduce. Another main thing is use of fuel guzzlers in the government. You realize in the previous government, there was a time whereby there was a policy that a government should not buy fuel guzzlers. They go for these less consumption vehicles. And then all of a sudden, that thing has resurfaced. Now, a motorcade of a president contains fuel guzzlers of over 100 vehicles. A trip from Nairobi to either Kisii will cost the government over 100 million Kenya shillings just to sustain that motorcade. So government must cut down all these fuel guzzlers they are using so that it be within limit. And we will not have reasons to borrow money and to sustain our expenditure. Two, a government must work on its physical reforms. And this one is aligned with the control of expenditure. A physical reforms must be there. This one will enable the government to cut its expenditure and increase its revenue. Physical reforms will come through cabinet resolutions and discussions. Cabinet must sit down and discuss who will accompany the president, how many motorcade, what is the procurement procedures of purchasing government motor vehicles, so that it ensures a conference, an hotel facility, who goes to an hotel, who is allowed, and where, at what point are the cabinet secretaries, permanent secretaries allowed to fly outside the country or within, and for what purpose and benefits. So this must come out in the physical reforms within the government to enable us control the expenditure. Three is raise revenue. You realize that one of the main reasons why we are taking debt is our revenue collection. Our revenue is low and our expenditure is too high. So we have to borrow so that that mismatch will bring to a level that can sustain the economy. But then we have now to raise our revenue. And raising our revenue doesn't mean that we need to increase revenue streams. That if somebody was paying 5 million, a company, now that company you increase to pay 20 million. No. All Kenyans are burdened with the tax. And you realize that tax reforms must be there. A government must do one thing, to increase the tax base so that we broaden the tax base in a manner that we untap the revenue streams which were not tapped in the previous finance bill. An increase in revenue will definitely lead to an uprising like the finance bill protest in 2024, which Kenyans were right. You are overburdened Kenyans with taxes, and now you want to increase taxes, and the expenditure is still shooting. So that will definitely reduce our debts. So the government must work in revenue reforms and also tax compliance. There was an incident that happened in Kisumu recently that somebody committed suicide at KRA because of tax compliance. If KRA can easily negotiate with people on repayment of tax, it can easily give KRA a lot of money because most Kenyans are willing to pay tax. So those are tax reforms which must be there, either down payment or repayment in installment. Because if you owe KRA even 10 million and you are willing to pay, it will even take even 5 years for you to pay that 10 million. So these are negotiations that KRA must come with their own reforms to increase revenue. Other than loss of life, uh, leaving out a manner that shutting down companies because of tax, that will not definitely help us raise revenue. So we need to have revenue reforms so that we increase our tax and revenue collection. Number 4, the government must, and those things I'm saying they must do. 4 is borrow money for development purposes. A government should not borrow money for expenditure of operation and maintenance and paying of personal emolument. All the money that are borrowed by the government must definitely be utilized in development. And this I'm talking about infrastructure development, a visible thing that somebody can see. Like for example, a government will borrow money to extend SGR from Naivasha to Busia. This is a development project and an infrastructure which will enable the government to also get revenue. And there is development in terms of infrastructure. 2, government must even borrow money to allow it to expand superhighway from Nairobi to Kisumu. The same way, the Thika superhighway is extremely useful. Even if it was borrowed money, Kenyans are seeing what that money is used for. So a government must borrow money specifically for development purposes. And lastly, this one is very essential. Number 5 is strengthen public financial transparency. A government must strengthen its public transparency through 2 main things. 1 is timely publishing. Nowadays, government go borrow money outside and they hide. Even they don't want to declare how much have they borrowed, what is the intent of borrowing. It is the public, the Kenyans, who are struggling to get this information. The Eurobond is now when it comes out, realize government has borrowed a lot of money for no good reason. So, timely publishing of these to Kenyans will be extremely useful. 2 is accessibility to information. If you borrow money, kindly allow Kenyans to access this information. You realize in the previous month, there was a young man called Murara Kibas who was going and seeing the government projects, stalled projects, and the guy has been frustrated until today. He has not come out and spoken about things. He has been frustrated with KRA, frustrated with visa, frustrated along the way with the government. Which a government must allow its own citizens to be transparent in their own activity, borrow for transparency. Tell the Kenyans we have borrowed to build this dam, we have borrowed to do this, and then let there be expenditure to tell us how much have you spent in constructing this, so that we can easily, public social audit can do. Is it worth value for money? That will easily enable us to move forward as a country. There are other things that a government must do, but I'll not definitely talk about them because they are so common. Economists will understand. Number 6 is diversify the funding sources. A government must diversify its funding sources, strengthen domestic debts in Kenya, and then issue new bonds, engage in public market privatization, which is a manner that has been done, but in a proper way. You realize, like privatization of these sugar factories. were done in a manner that no one understands. Privatization of JKIA, the public outcry was there. If the government must do this thing in a channel and an orderly way, public participation to be done, things to be done in an orderly manner, then it will definitely improve and reduce our debt collection. But if things are done for the benefit of the few in the government and not for the benefit of the public, then you realize that there is an outcry of the public. So government must definitely do that so that all the citizens are comfortable with what the government intends to do. Remember Constitution 2010 gave people the power. And now the government with the few people are organizing on what the public should be doing. In 2025, that should not be happening in Kenya. Let's honor the Constitution 2010. Finally, the government must promote retail markets. And this one we're talking about the M-Akiba and other things, so that there is a financial flow within the country. Thank you, and let's meet again in our discussion